Ladies and gentlemen, when Americans perished in a consulate located within a country that President Obama's foreign policy absolutely decimated, the response from media and the response from Democrats was, well, those endless requests, those countless requests for security, added security, they didn't make their way up to Clinton. There's no evidence of that. Well, the State Department ignored, but not Clinton. That type of mentality also is exemplified by how Democrats protect President Obama. Oh, well, he didn't know that President Trump's campaign was being investigated. He didn't investigate his political rival in Trump or the Republican candidate. President Obama didn't. We didn't, for the first time in our history, from Washington until President Obama, veer away from a peaceful transition of political power within the United States of America. Though that didn't happen. Now you have the issue of, well, President Obama knew because the Army told him and because the intelligence community told him. How do we know? Because the Daily Beast says so and because the Washington Post say so, and they have sources. All right, let's look at the Washington Post. Max Boot goes ahead and says, well, this wouldn't have happened with Clinton because, Clinton would have heeded the warnings. Well, she didn't when when America needed her the most. She didn't. But here, according to U.S. officials familiar with the spy agency reporting, Washington Post. So you're looking at a statement where issuing ominous classified briefings in January and February about the global danger posed by the current crisis, President Trump and lawmakers played down the threat and failed to take action that might have slowed the spread of the pathogen. Really? How do you know this, Washington Post? According to U.S. officials familiar with spy agency reporting. Okay. And then the intelligence report didn't predict when it might land on U.S. shores. So, according to U.S. officials familiar, you can just chalk that up as the usual nonsense from the Washington Post. Almost every major story from the Washington Post and New York Times about Trump, whether it was Russia, whether it was impeachment, which, by the way, the impeached President Trump, they say it's a criminal presidency. I want to know where in the impeachment is there a criminal statute that he broke? Because the articles of impeachment don't list one. And interestingly enough, they kept saying, oh, well, obstruction of justice. Why didn't they list the alleged obstruction of justice in the Mueller probe within the articles of impeachment? Oh, that's right. That's right. Because they were bluffing the whole time. So the Washington Post, according to U.S. officials familiar, is a meaningless statement. You can say whatever you like. President Trump robbed a bank last night, according to U.S. officials familiar. Then you have the Daily Beast. The Army warned President Trump. Okay. The Daily Beast has two sources who say both generals were aware of the document and stand by its reporting. Okay. So the Army basically contradicted the report from the Daily Beast, saying contrary to what was reported, the PowerPoint slide. So they found this unclassified PowerPoint slide, and they said, "Oh my God, Trump knew." There's no evidence that that unclassified PowerPoint slide got to President Trump. President Trump doesn't see every single thing people in the Army see. So, contrary to what was reported, the PowerPoint slide. So this is the Army refutes the Daily Beast article. Contrary to what was reported in the PowerPoint slide referenced in the story, that was neither briefed to nor seen by leadership at either U.S. Army North or U.S. North Command prior to the reporting sending the leaked documents to the command's public affairs office. The reporter's unsourced assertions the document made its way to the highest levels of both commands is simply not true. Then it says, well, the Daily Beast has two sources who say both generals were aware, so who cares? Who cares about the sources? There's a million, you can have a source that says something, And what if sources say that Clinton personally knew about the endless requests? What if sources say that President Obama actually asked Comey to investigate President Trump? What if you could say sources are only as good as how accurate they've been proven to be? We'll just leave it at that. And so, then even the article goes, it is unknown how widely distributed the Army's estimate was. So they found this PowerPoint slide, and they say, well, this is an example of President Trump knew about, the Army told him. And the headline, of course, is Army warned in early February. But interestingly enough, doesn't say the Army warned President Trump. So I guess that headline is a bit more accurate than the Washington Post's headline. But the assumption is, well, the intelligence community warned, the Army warned. Go look at whether it's Pritzker in Illinois, the governor who, in the beginning of February, and I explained this in the segment prior to this one, had a State of the State address. Go find the State of the State address of Andrew Cuomo. Go find the State of the State address of Governor Newsom in California. Go in February, he made his Whitmer in Michigan, Inslee in Washington. Go read their State of the State addresses. They list nothing about ventilators, masks, anything to do with the current health crisis. Nothing. They were completely blindsided. The entire media establishment was focused only. Go look at the Daily Beast and Washington Post articles from February and January. They're only about impeachment. They're only about pick one topic that has nothing to do with the current health crisis, that has to do with how horrible Trump is, according to them. And the Daily Beast wrote a very unethical, inaccurate hit piece on me when I was a Bernie Sanders supporter. Okay? A Bernie Sanders supporter. So, and now I'm President Trump's, I'm a supporter, I'm a Trump supporter, but you just have to understand, it's like, it's really interesting. The same editors that gave me a stamp of approval on each one of my articles that went viral in the Huffington Post, The Hill, and Salon are now working at all of the places, different places, all the wonderful, some other perhaps, well, they're working at other publications, liberal publications, publishing the same things about President Trump, how he should have known, he was horrible, oh my God, he dropped the ball, da-da-da. And there's not a shred of evidence that Trump looked at a piece of paper and said, I am going to ignore this. Okay. The standard by which they defend Clinton is not the standard by which they defend Trump. Because they don't defend Trump, but it's not the standard by which they view President Trump. Okay. Furthermore, take things into context. They tried to remove President Trump from office. That was their only obsession. And the entire media obsession was, he withheld military assistance to go after Biden, which is the most absurd claim, because he would have paid the $400 million to ensure that Biden's going to be nominee. Hillary Clinton's going to be nominee. Hillary Clinton is going to be nominee. And I will have made the biggest political prediction of all time. So, all of this is a charade. But to go after President Trump when none of the governors complaining about Trump, from Pritzker to Cuomo to Whitmer to Inslee, the governors play this game, this very pathetic act, Well, now is not the time for partisanship. We need help, Mr. President. Well, why did you need help? You gave your State of the State addresses weeks before this calamity. You couldn't be Nostradamus for 4 weeks. It doesn't take Nostradamus. You couldn't look 4 weeks in advance. He's not the governor of Michigan, Trump. He's not the governor of Illinois or the governor of New York. And notice how media gives them the biggest cushion of all time. New York is the hardest hit. Why isn't South Carolina or Wyoming hit? Like, what you look at these. What about Arkansas? You look at all of these. There's like 9 states still that have like normal functioning lives and economies. Okay, why are they able to function, but New York was dreadfully unprepared? It was Andrew Cuomo's job to tell if he didn't have enough ventilators, number one, to find ventilators, but number two, if he needed the federal government's help, the federal government's there, but he should have warned President Trump weeks prior. You can't just, say we need this right now because there are 50 other states, Andrew Cuomo and Governor Pritzker. There are, it's unbelievable. The Illinois governor said, well, Trump doesn't understand the word federal. It's like, no, he does. He does. Apparently, that governor and other governors don't understand what their job was. Their jobs are to make sure that the people of their state are adequately prepared for an impending calamity that was only 4 weeks away from their 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 weeks away from their, or 8 weeks away from their State of the State addresses. And this thing went down in March. January and February, no mention from governors, and people were just saying we should remove President Trump. All of January, they were saying remove Trump from the Senate. So then then February, they were like, well, you know what? We should have removed Trump in the Senate. Then there were articles, you know what? We didn't remove him, but we're still glad that we went through impeachment. Then they flipped the script and they said, well, oh my God, Trump should have known. None of the Democratic Party, and there are even statements by everybody from Fauci to Bill de Blasio to you know what? It's not a major threat for the country. Bill de Blasio was still going to gyms the day that he closed all the gyms in New York. And he said, yeah, it's just, it's not that serious. So, and then they opposed the travel ban, which could you imagine if President Trump lifted the ban now, what they would say? So they're just petulant. They exist. Look, their lives are consumed with utter contempt for President Trump. Luckily, it's not the majority of the country. Luckily, the majority of the country knows that just a couple weeks ago, he had 60% approval rating. Yeah, sorry, 10 million people unemployed. That's gonna lower the approval rating a little bit, even though it's not his fault. If it was up to President Trump, very likely we'd have a whole different. He has to abide by what the prevailing mentality is on this. So he did. You look at the aggregate numbers; they're not correlating to the doomsday scenarios. Okay, if you look at just in 2018, okay, in 2018, what was it? 80,000 Americans. In September 27, 2018, the flu was okay. Last 4 days. 80,000 Americans lost their lives. CDC, 80,000 people with the flu last winter lost their lives. Okay, so where were the daily totals and exponential growth and count? And we are in 53,000 in 1 year under President Obama. Okay, in addition to every year under President Obama, similar to like either 20-something to 50,000. Okay. But we didn't shut down the entire economy. That's a whole other story for another time. But the point is, media sensationalizes everything, takes everything out of context, and doesn't treat President Trump the way they treat Clinton. With Clinton and President Obama, it's, well, they didn't know. Just because something existed, just because they were warned repeatedly, just because they should have known, just because it's obvious that they made the call, for whatever it is, under their administration. Well, you can't prove that President Obama failed to veto the sale of 20% of U.S. uranium capacity because the Clinton Foundation received millions from Uranium One. You can't prove that. No, but you could pretty much connect the dots. But you can't prove it. So you can't prove that Trump knew, that Trump looked at a document. Okay, you want to play that game. And furthermore, it's actually far more plausible for President Trump not to have been given an Army document that even the Army department itself that the Daily Beast is reporting on refutes any of the claims. And then the rebuttal from the Daily Beast is, oh, well, we stand by our reporting. We have two sources. So what? Your sources could be lying. Or your sources could be Debbie Wasserman Schultz or somebody who's a Democrat or aligned with Democrats. Okay. And the Washington Post is even worse. They don't even have sources. They just have, according to, officials familiar with the matter. So, what do they have? According to officials familiar. It doesn't even say source. It's according to officials familiar. Give me your thoughts below. If you want to support my voice long term, my Patreon is below. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point right now, any headline you see about Trump, find out if it's a source, if it's according to our sources or American officials familiar with the matter. If it is, I would disregard it. Give me your thoughts. Thank you so very much. Subscribe to H.A. Goodman's other channel right now.